Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Sam or Xjaws, and today I'm bringing you guys a domination gameplay on the map Kowloon, and I want to do something today that people have been asking me to do for a really long time, and I'm finally able to do this because of, our schedules and whatnot, but that is a dual commentary with a good friend of mine. So, Bern, you want to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, sure. I'm Bern. I go to Texas A&M, Galveston, and this is my first time back in Pennsylvania with my friends for, 8 weeks now, so it's been a long time, but we're definitely having a great time.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people want us to talk about, how we met, but I think we can both agree that was a really, really complicated and long story that we'll have to save for another time if people are interested.
Start with a fight, but yeah, that's
long and then stocks and all. Oh wow, there's a lot to talk about. But I think a better story that we should talk about.
We may cover it one day.
Yeah, a better story that we should talk about is the weekend where we snuck away to L.A. Okay,
definitely one of our best stories.
Yeah, so this was when the Billionaires Challenge was going on, right? And I had found out about it, and I thought it was completely unreal. I heard from someone that I might get invited to go to a billionaire's house, and that there would be a $10,000 tournament, and all this stuff that I just absolutely couldn't believe. And I was told I got to invite someone. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, obviously I'm going to end up inviting my dad or my mom, right? And I talked to my dad a little bit about it, and he couldn't go because he had business engagements. He had to do stuff that weekend. It was 4th of July weekend, so it just didn't make sense. Talked to my mom, and I'm thinking to myself, well, Mom, you got to go with me because I could only go under one condition, and that is if they go. And she says, well, I have stuff too. It's 4th of July. My mom works for QVC. She had a product going on air that weekend, and it was just, sort of unacceptable. And my parents, the way they sort of worded it to me was like, well, we both can't go, so you can't go. So it took like 2 or 3 days of like convincing for them until finally they're like, all right, you can go with someone else. That's fine. You can go alone. You don't need us there to supervise you. And that's when I texted you, and I can't imagine what you were probably thinking about.
Oh yeah, this. It was crazy.
I sent you
Xjaws inviting me to Hollywood. Just another crazy idea. And at first I didn't really understand the magnitude that it was a gaming tournament and everything. I just it was so intrigued.
There was too much to explain.
Yeah, there was too much to explain just with a text message that said you want to come to Hollywood. But of course, regardless of what I thought at the time, was just, oh yeah, hell yeah. So
then the ticket. That's what we had to deal with. You couldn't convince your parents, right?
I had attempted to convince my parents the whole time.
Yeah,
it was honestly a battle.
Because you're telling your parent, I have to assume you go up to your parents and you're like, can I go, take a trip this weekend?
I just said, I said, can me and Sam do stuff for the 4th of July weekend? They're like, sure. And they were like, aren't you going, going to do stuff with Brad? Maybe you can invite him down. I'm like, well, yeah, that's funny because that's what we were going to do. But, Sam, he's got business this weekend in Hollywood and L.A., so... can I just go with him? He got me an extra ticket, and they absolutely not. They're like, what type of business? And they kind of asked me about what he was doing.
To ask questions regardless.
They had known he did stuff with YouTube and everything, and they'd known him from me helping him with his stocks and stuff. But it was too crazy. They said, you're going to a billionaire's house. We have no idea where you're going. His parents aren't going. It's just going to be you two kids with a bunch of other YouTube people. They said absolutely no way.
So then we decided we had a plan.
Yeah, I came up with an idea that if Sam put my name on the ticket, that I could use it as leverage against my parents and force them to let me go.
It made sense.
It made sense, but it did not work, and it just complicated the situation.
Even worse. Yeah.
So I got the plan. Yeah.
So I get the ticket, and I get all Bern's information on there, and I send it on over to him. He's like, it's all official now. This is gonna work out. We had no doubt in our minds that because we had like 3 days before we actually had to get on this flight. We had 3 days for him to convince his parents that this is legitimate and he should be able to go out there and all. So I remember we talked and texted back and forth for a couple of days, but I had to go down to New Jersey for the weekend with my parents just for the beginning of the weekend because it was 4th of July weekend, and it's 2 hours away from where you are. So our plan was to meet at the airport. But regardless, so we're texting back and forth, and we're like, all right, when are you going to be able to convince your parents today? And you say, I tried. I'll talk to them again later. This and that.
And it just wasn't working. At that point, I later in the night after I gave my last hurrah, my big, come on, you got to let me go. It was just I had realized that it was not going to The trip was not going to happen by going through my parents.
Exactly. So that was when the whole mood of what we were talking about changed. It was all weekend. How do we convince our parents? How do we convince them that
it just changed into how are we gonna go?
Without
my parents figuring it out.
So that's when the plan came into action, right? Your plan. It was that like we said before, you were already planning to go with Brad to his boat in New Jersey, and that was like an all weekend obligation. Actually, no, it started a day after I needed you. So you needed to convince your parents that Brad was leaving for the boat early, and this included Bern going into your house at like 4 a.m. in the morning, right? Because we had like a 7 a.m. flight, and you had to convince your parents that you were collecting clothing to go on Brad's boat, right?
Yes. And it was like at 4 a.m. in the morning, so that was like sketchy to my parents as it was. But they're leaving early so we can get down and do water ski and stuff. So I told them, and that had ticked my parents off too. But I was like, you know what, you got to push the envelope. You got to just get your stuff, get out of there, and get to this flight with Sam. But it
would have worked. You know what? Let's talk about that. It should have worked out, but what stopped us in the end from your parents finding out? Was it your sister?
Well, they did find out.
Yeah.
I had to pretend I couldn't take phone calls from out there and all that stuff. I didn't want to, them to see any of that stuff. I was just trying to keep it on the down low that I'll talk to my parents the least amount that I can this whole weekend. And the weekend was crazy. Honestly, one of the most, if not the most,
I think
fun
we're going to have to do an
weekend
entire commentary just about the stuff we did there,
Yeah, so all right, I'll just say how we got caught, because they probably want to know that. So I was trying to keep it so I could talk to my parents the least the whole time. So I said, there's no charger at his boat for my phone, so I can talk a little. And things were getting suspicious. And I had used my credit card, and I remember my dad figuring out that it had been spent in Los Angeles. And then when we got back, because for the first couple days after we got back, my parents still thought I might have gone to the boat. But there were millions of questions. How are you doing? And they finally called the neighbors, which was Brad, and who I said I went to the boat with, and they said, was Bern there? And they're like, I had told my neighbors to believe what I was saying, like
to lie,
to kind of vouch, but they wouldn't lie. They just said, I think we saw him around. So my mom calls me and says, they don't want to, they're saying they didn't see you. Didn't you stay on their boat? And I go, oh, yeah, I was going to stay on their boat, but then I went to my other friend Dustin's boat, who also was down there. And it just got so sketchy. My mom finally said, give me Dustin's mom's phone number. And I knew at that point I couldn't extend this lie any farther. So what I did was I just sent my mom that from that song 86753, and I remember I was with Brad when I sent it. I just sent that, and that honestly sent my parents to know. I got the phone call to come home. Yeah. And I got in a good bit of trouble, but that weekend was well worth any trouble.
Yeah, it was crazy. And like we said, we'll talk about it in another commentary. If you guys enjoyed this, I know a lot of people have been asking for this for a while, so just leave some comments. Let us know if you want us to do this again and what kind of stuff you'd like us to talk about this weekend or other stories, because we honestly have millions of them at this point. But yeah, so check out Bern. He's got a Twitter if you want to follow him on there. He's probably giving
stock advice.
Yeah, he's probably giving out stock advice.
You want to see what X-Jaws' stocks are doing,
Yeah, so you can check him out. Link to that will be in the description of this video. And, like I said, just let us know what you thought and let us know what you'd like to see in the future. That's pretty much it. Anything else you'd like to add?
That was fun. I liked it.
Your first commentary ever. It's kind of cool. All right, man. See ya.